here we go. We're driving along Bayshore Boulevard on the 27th of October, 2017, and my baby brother George is here for his 50th high school reunion, and we're going around seeing old haunts. I lived here for 5 years, and 5 great years on 2939 Wallcraft Avenue, and you can see some of the Tampa skyline over there, and but it's just really this Bayshore Boulevard drive is one of the most beautiful. Well, it is the most beautiful drive along water I have ever encountered. Any country I've ever visited. It's just gorgeous, and this seawall runs forever. This sidewalk runs forever.
11 miles.
You can really get in condition. Yeah, 11 miles. And you can run along here or walk along it, or you can bike along it. They've got a bike lane here too, although I see a lot of people riding their bikes on the sidewalk, which with some of this traffic is certainly a wise decision. You've got some various hotels along here now. One time, years ago, 50 years ago, the Bayshore Towers was the first one, and Medora Houston always wanted to live there. I don't know if they've renamed one of these hotels. That was once the Bayshore Towers. But anyway, it's a beautiful drive. When we lived here, of course, it was all middle-class people, and there were 35 to 40 kids between Wallcraft and Bayshore and McNeil Avenue. So, but here we are back here again.
Don't forget to pan over to Davis Islands, Tampa in the Bay.
And of
Once mud flats at the base of the Hillsboro River, an early pioneer, Ben T. Davis,
and also
dredged in all of that and advertised it in the 20s when our father was a boy as Tampa in the Bay. It's still one of the most exclusive neighborhoods of the city.
Yes, and there's Peter O'Knight Airport's over there. I guess the first airport in Tampa. And Mr. Davis also built the causeway that people now call it Courtney Campbell Causeway, which my mother was always living about, and I'm carrying on that tradition because Davis built it, and then Courtney Campbell, this crooked politician, Florida politician, put a few picnic tables out there and somehow got it called after him. So I'm going to carry on my mother's tradition and call it Davis Causeway. Anyway, some really beautiful houses along here. I couldn't even imagine what it would cost to live here now. But
fortunately, air conditioners have become more efficient, so operating them isn't as expensive as it used to be.
But it's just really a wonderful drive along Bayshore Boulevard. I've known this boulevard now since the 1940s when I was a little boy. Mom would let us walk all the way down to Bayshore, but she forbid us to cross, and I don't blame her.
You might as well keep recording, Gene, because soon we'll cross the Platte Street Bridge and we'll be over in Tampa in the old Fort Brooks section.
I'm still recording.
They've now built all this waterfront. Now, this is Tampa General Hospital, where I was born.
Yep, that's where George was born. I'm not sure. That building was not here.
No, it wasn't. But
building George.
I also had my first knee surgery in that hospital in the 70s. And the entire Tampa downtown waterfront area has been reinvented in ways that I still don't know or understand because it all happened since I left. But now we're approaching the Platte Street Bridge.
Well, there used to be there's the statue of Christopher Columbus.
Okay.
Been there ever since I can remember.
And we will cross the Platte Street Bridge, which crosses the Hillsboro River, where it opens into the bay. And now we will be in downtown Tampa.
Well, there's some of the nice old, there's the wide part of the Hillsboro River moving into the bay. There used to be a restaurant here called the Old Fort Restaurant.
Yes. Well, and because the original settlement of Tampa was a military fort called Fort Brooke.
That's right.
Until the 1880s, when the city of Tampa started around it, because it had been established as a means of protecting the very early settlers, because the last Native American conflicts were in Florida, which is one of the reasons why so many towns and cities in Florida begin with the name Fort. Fort Myers, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Pierce, etc., because the system in Florida was that there was a military fort 1 or 2 days horseback rides apart from each other, so that early settlers could move from one place to another. Just like the El Camino Real mission system on the coast of California, the missions were a day's ride apart for the travelers going up and down the coast. In Florida, it was a military fort, sometimes attached to maritime shipping, because much of Florida before 1900 was only accessible by boat or by very horrific traveling on trails in the interior, much of which was only 1 or 2 feet above the water table, and just horrible to try to negotiate or navigate by foot or on horseback.
Well, I have to add something too to what George said about Tampa originally starting. Actually, a Spanish explorer in the 1500s named Pánfilo de Narváez actually started a settlement in Tampa, but the Indians ran him out of here and most of his men died. They tried to escape down the Hillsboro River. They actually took their armor and made nails out of it to make rafts and stuff. But so Tampa originally was attempted way back not long after Columbus discovered America. But the Indians were so wild and tough here. We had our Florida history when we were kids, and it was very interesting. I don't know if they teach it anymore, but we learned a lot about our state, because Florida has the oldest city in the United States, discovered by Ponce de Leon.
Established by Ponce de Leon, St. Augustine.
1513.
Florida was under 5 flags: Spanish, French, British, Confederate, and the United States.
And also, one of the most beautiful, intact, fully intact fortresses in the United States, Spanish fort, is the Castillo de San Marcos in St. Augustine. In fact, Gary Cooper made a movie in the 40s called Distant Drums about Seminole Wars, and that fortress is in the movie. Something George probably didn't know, but I do, seeing that I'm an old movie buff.
And what was the distinctive feature of Castillo de San Marcos? The construction was made out of coquina, which was a very basic concrete made out of shells from these tiny little creatures that lived in that part of the state. And the unique feature of coquina construction was that coquina remained soft, so the cannonballs did not shatter the walls of the fort, but rather were just absorbed into the very thick walls that were approximately 6 feet, 12 feet, some places 20 feet thick. So it was an indestructible fortress for the Spanish, because cannonballs would just sink into the coquina without actually shattering the walls. Now we're exiting on the 22nd Street Port of Tampa exit. This section of town, pan around, Gene, was once known as Palmetto Beach, and it was the southern extension of Ybor City, which is the Spanish enclave in Tampa, home of the original cigar industries here that migrated from Havana by way of Key West in the 1880s. Ybor City, Tampa, has the distinction of being the first bilingual city in the United States in the 1880s, when the cigar industry established here. The city became half Spanish speaking almost overnight. And that remains its strongest legacy, because then the Italians came, and so Tampa had the first trilingual newspaper published in the United States that is still published weekly online, La Gaceta, Inglés, Español, y Italiano. So over 140 years ago, I see it.
Okay, you're
Tampa was probably one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the United States, but because it was also in rural Florida, it was not sophisticated. And that strength is why to this day it is still one of the friendliest cities in the United States, because Tampanians have known diversity for multiple generations, and people who are different from us don't frighten us. In fact, we embrace all of the richness of the cultures that they bring with them.
Now, you may not be able to read what it says on the top of that building. Arturo Fuente.
It's one of the old cigar factories.
Apparently there's another building right here, good old cigar factory.
The cigar industry has pretty much eclipsed out of Tampa, but the buildings remain as historic buildings that have been converted into offices and other commercial use. Now, all of this sojourn up the bay and etc., we are on our way to one of the oldest Spanish restaurants in Tampa, the Columbia restaurant in Ybor City. The Columbia remains an architectural jewel with rich tile mosaic, excellent food. It's a wonderful place to have lunch or dinner. Just don't eat the tartar sauce on the seafood. In fact, avoid the seafood if you can. That's the old joke among Tampanians. Hopefully that's changed. But Tampa remains a very rich city with very deep cultural roots. I'm proud to have been born here. I'm also proud to have grown up near here, but with very strong roots to the city. It remains a wonderful place to live.
Something about coquina shells also. Dad took George and I to the beach in Largo about 1956. We'd go to a movie every night. In fact, one of the movies we saw had just come out, The Searchers with John Wayne. But anyway, we took some a little bit of water and put coquina shells in the pot and boiled it, and when the shells opened up, they made this incredibly delicious